The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640.
Hi, and welcome to View from Space. I'm the Spaceman. I'd like to welcome you in right now if you're driving around town or if you're at work listening to AM 640. I'll welcome you in. Or if you're checked into Shaw Direct on channel 865, picking up the signal there, I welcome you in also. Or if you're listening to me on your 3 or your 4G personal communication device via the Stream the World software, I welcome you in. Or if you're where some call the best seat in the house to check out A View from Space, logged on to 640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there, I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. Let me start with an email. Really missed the show last week. What a bummer it was for us. Can only imagine how it was for you. I wish you could get a website or a blog where you can get the word out or listen to you during the week when major events are happening, or you could do an occasional podcast, especially when you can't get on the airwaves. We would all really appreciate it. As soon as the Obama drama hit the news on May Day, Beltane, I thought of your previous show the night before the royal wedding. How you said there would be another major event involving a human sacrifice, either a mass killing or a single person. And, of course, you were right again. Even if the killing of Osama was fake, they did kill a number of people there in dramatic style, creating a huge psyop. Even if it was not Osama bin Laden, surely they sacrificed someone there and made us all a party to it. I know you'll have tons of material, but I'm hoping you will also get into Mother's Day, another merchandising, Jewish Catholicized pagan goddess worship day. He goes on with some more to say, but basically that has been the refrain on most of my emails, and believe me, missing the show last week because of our commitments to the NHL here at AM 640 Talk Radio, I did not appear. But what a couple of weeks that have just passed. Wow. The last time I spoke to you was the end of what's known as Holy Week. The Hindus celebrate Holi, a spring religious festival celebrating Mahavir Jayanti, the birth of Mahavira, and the last Tirthankara. It's the most important religious holiday in all of Jainism. In the Christian religion, it was Good Friday, Easter Sunday, and Resurrection Monday. Passover in the Jewish religion was the following Tuesday, the 19th of April. And this is the date when the pagan worship, sun worship religion of paganism starts with their full occult holiday span from April 19th all the way through to May 1st. It's a total of 13 days, of course, which includes Walpurgisnacht, and culminates with a high witching holiday of Beltane, which was the Monday of this past week. The 13, of course, represents the cult and reincarnation. The occult holiday requires blood sacrifice to the beast during this most critical 13 13-day period. But this was not just any 13-day period holiday known as the blood sacrifice to the beast. This, I believe, was very, very special. As a matter of fact, so special, many events were based on the actual wedding itself and the wedding date. Here are just some of the important historic dates that have been staged by the Illuminati according to these blood sacrifice days of this 13-day period, this most critical occult holiday. In 1775, the Battle of Lexington and Concord happened, which made the Masonic-led Revolutionary War inevitable in the United States of America. In 1906, of course, Kelsey's cow was blamed for starting the San Francisco fire, which was also an earthquake. And of course, I do not think for a moment that it was a cow that kicked a lantern over in a barn that started that fire that burnt down almost the entire city of San Francisco. That was in 1906, right around the blood sacrifice to the beast, where fire is, of course, prominent as the way of death. 1943 will prove it to you. After trapping the last Jewish resistance fighters in a storm drain in Warsaw and holding them for several days, Nazi stormtroopers began to pour fire into each end of that storm drain using flamethrowers. They continued pouring fire into that drain until all of the fighters were dead. Blood sacrifice brought about by a fiery conflagration. 1993, 50 years later to the very day after the 1943 Warsaw event, government troops in the U.S. tanks and other military equipment stormed the compound of David Koresh and his followers at Waco, Texas, if you'll recall. Certainly this operation fulfilled the basic requirements for human sacrifice, trauma by fire, and especially young sacrificial victims at this time of year. 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing. Once again, fire and death on this day with, of course, a daycare center located in that Oklahoma City building. And all the children there were killed in a fiery inferno. 1998, German terrorist group Red Army faction announces their dissolution after 28 years. A very, very large and very historical date in the Illuminati calendar. 1999, of course, was the Columbine High School massacre where many students died in a firefight. 2005, Joseph Elwa Ratzinger, as he was formerly known, was elected Pope Benedict the 16th. Gives you an idea of how important that date was also to the Illuminati. In 2007, at this time of year, the Johnson Space Center shooting and an incident of hostages in Building 44, more deaths by fire, shooting. In 2010, of course, last year, the Gulf of Mexico and Deepwater Horizon explosion and oil leak that pumped, they say, billions and billions of gallons of crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The explosion killed 11 men working on the platform. So, you can see why I posed the question the last time I spoke with you. I wondered what blood sacrifice was planned for that next weekend that was coming up. The one where A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio was preempted. And now we know. Back with more in a moment on A View from Space on AM 640. I'm just getting started.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the guy that calls Space. You can email me. I have a couple of addresses. space@640toronto.com is one, or spaceman@640toronto.com the other. CP writes, hey, Space, the backdrop to Obama's speech seemed so eerily similar to images of the Pillars of Hercules. Is that a stretch? And I have so much to say about those Pillars of Hercules. I believe, of course, that's exactly what they were to invoke. But not to you or I, the unwashed, the ones who are not initiated into the Enlightenment, who are sun worshippers. That's where the message is intended to go to. And of course, they see this immediately because of the research I've done in the past 20 years on this group I call the Illuminati. I understand their symbolism. This is why they're so easily trackable, and their bondage to their numerology and their sacred geometry. So, Beltane has just passed Walpurgis weekend. We can call it with what? In the perfect middle of this weekend? The royal wedding. Of all things. Before I get into the wedding, here's the first of two, at least perceived, blood sacrifices that supposedly happened on Beltane, a night for blood sacrifice with an emphasis on children as the victims. Dateline Tripoli, Libya, May 1st, Beltane. The royal wedding night was the night the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi escaped a NATO missile strike in Tripoli that killed one of his sons. His youngest son, they stress. There are two Saifs. This was the youngest one. If you try to find a picture of the youngest son, there isn't one. And also, we're told in that NATO missile airstrike, 3 young grandchildren were killed also. This from a Libyan government spokesman late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. The royal wedding night. NATO has a missile strike on Gaddafi's home compound. Hours later, Gaddafi's forces shell a besieged rebel port in a sign that the airstrike had not forced a change in regime tactics. In other words, Gaddafi is not going away. This story is not going away. Just as it's going to take almost to the end of the year, they say, for the Fukushima nuclear power plant to mop up. Yes, that's still going on, but it's way in the back burner. The quick update on that is they've entered the reactor room that has been causing all of the trouble just this week also. High levels of radiation, however, men were in there, so it looks as though it's exactly like the Deepwater Horizon Gulf oil spill explosion, where oil is bad, was the message for so many days. And it looks like it'll maybe even beat that number of 152 days last summer with this Fukushima nuclear mop-up. NATO's strike on the Gaddafi family compound in a residential area of Tripoli late Saturday last weekend signaled escalating pressure there, saying on the Libyan leader who has tried to crush an armed rebellion that erupted in mid-February. You know, for a bunch of guys, average Libyan young men that had no rifles to begin with, no bullets. I don't know where they got the rifles from. for what they say. There was one time, too, they were running out of gas. They were actually filling water bottles, if you can believe it. I mean, who in the Western world would actually believe this thick propaganda? It's almost to the point of absurd, where they showed the same half-ton over and over. And now we have the herky-jerky camera phone pictures of people running. Or are they running? We're not even sure. They could be walking out of a soccer match. We don't even know that. It just looks like there is chaos because of the herky-jerky fashion of the cameras. I don't believe they're handheld cameras to begin with on cell phones, because I don't think very many Libyans actually have cell phones. They're just dirt poor. But it seems to me this ragtag group of rebels who have no real commanding officer are really holding their own with this force, this professional army of Gaddafi's. So in other words, throw all the propaganda out. It's so absolutely absurd. It's beyond anybody's actual grasp that this is actually happening. I mean, who could actually believe this? But the propaganda war is being waged heavily. It also allows other countries to begin to choose sides on the upcoming war that is real war and is on the way. It also drew criticism from Russia, this NATO attack on Gaddafi's residential compound. Russia accused the alliance of going beyond its UN mandate to protect Libyan civilians by trying to kill Gaddafi. More and more facts indicate that the aim of the anti-Libyan coalition is the physical destruction of Gaddafi. So says a Russian lawmaker, Konstantin Kozachev, who often serves as the mouthpiece for the Kremlin's views on foreign affairs. The alliance acknowledged that it struck a command and control building, that's last Saturday night on the royal wedding night, but insisted all of its targets were military and linked to Gaddafi's systematic attacks on the population. Are you believing that also? That they're there with this no-fly zone and bombing simply to save civilian lives? I would suggest to you that there are more people being killed by the bombing than are being saved. NATO spokeswoman Carmen Romero said it was not targeting any individuals, adding to the report that the deaths were actually even unconfirmed. British Prime Minister David Cameron, who is really on the ropes in Britain with all of their troubles, without confirming fatalities, also told the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, that the strike was in line with the United Nations mandate to prevent a loss of civilian life by targeting Gaddafi's war-making machine. Once again, the British Prime Minister espousing the party line, the propaganda line. And simply because of their positions of authority, we're expected to lap it up and say, well, they're obviously telling the truth, or they wouldn't be the Prime Minister, or they wouldn't be in control of an entire country's government, would they? Or would they? Space, back in a moment on A View from Space on AM 640.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
The Spaceman, AM 640, and A View from Space. You can email me. Two places. I got two addresses. Spaceman at 640toronto.com is one, and space, just simply space at 640toronto.com the other. Now, some rebels in Libya have questioned the veracity of the claim by the Gaddafi regime that his youngest son and the grandchildren also perished in this NATO missile attack on their home compound near Tripoli, saying the regime could be just trying to discredit the international military campaign. It just shows you that no one really has a grip on the truth, on what is really happening on the ground, in the air, and around Libya. The quote is from one rebel who is, of course, unnamed. We don't know if it's true or not because Gaddafi is a liar. He is probably trying to pressure the international community. I will only believe it if you put the body in front of me. This was played on Libyan state television. And soon after, the coffins actually appeared, but not the bodies themselves, but there were coffins saying, here are the bodies. This is obviously a battle for the mind going on right now with propaganda being so skewed. As I said, it's impossible to tell which is real and what is a lie. Most North Americans and even Europeans are walking around right now just lapping it up, the ones that are so totally and absolutely and completely brainwashed they think it is all on the level and real what's being reported to them. Did you know now that the international news organizations do not even have to verify whether it's true or not? They can go on and broadcast it as news. As you know, I do this very same thing, but I do my research, but I am not a newscaster. I am not bringing you the news. This show is called A View from Space. That's all it is. Space is a person. When you come on with the news, you are to be in the position of authority to give the authoritative truth, as, of course, the mass-controlled, Illuminati-controlled media see it, which is propaganda. The truth is, and it's planned this way, that no one will really ever know the real story. And so it comes back to simple perception. The people that want to believe it's true will say it's true and defend it, no matter how absurd the news stories become. The people that do not trust their leaders and question authority will believe they are lies. Imagine people trusting politicians in these very, very tenuous times. Yet that same person will tell you that politicians are lowly liars. Yet they trust them in these situations. Remember what Hitler's propaganda minister once said, the famous quote by Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister for Hitler's Nazi regime. He said, the bigger the lie, the more it will be believed. And I always like to bring up the moon landing when I hear that quote. That is one big lie. But so many still actually believe that we went to the moon and back. Gaddafi, who has been in power for more than 4 decades, has fought fiercely to put down this so-called uprising against his regime. We're told that began with protests inspired by a wave of Mideast unrest, they called it, and escalated into an armed rebellion. That is so absolutely absurd. But the two sides have been locked in a stalemate, we're told now, with Gaddafi holding much of the western half of the country and the rebels maintaining the eastern strongholds. How? We don't know. They just got enough gas to fill water bottles, and there's no guns, and they need weapons, but somehow they're maintaining their eastern strongholds. You see, the real truth is the Illuminati want to get the West involved deeper and deeper in Libya. They are going to come up with an excuse to deploy ground forces. It will make it another Iraq. By the way, all U.S. soldiers are due to pull out of Iraq by the winter equinox this coming December. NATO warplanes have been carrying out airstrikes in Libya, they say, for the past month as part of a UN mandate to protect Libyan civilians. Do you really believe that? So there lies the battle for your mind, whether or not you're going to believe it or not. Because if you don't believe it, it's going to get worse, and they're going to make everyone believe by calling a war. And then you will be challenged. Will you back the war effort? Or will you not? And that's when the pressure is really going to be applied. The sun worshippers have had their what I believe, most important weekend in thousands of years. Literally thousands of years last weekend. It wasn't just an ordinary Walpurgis weekend. The sun worshipper's symbol is a circle with a dot in the middle. The shape, the circle, is a symbol for what they call the wheel of the year. That's where the circle comes from. In the ancient times, people believed and lived in sync with the land, the stars, and the changing seasons. They saw how the earth, the tides of the ocean, the cycles of the moon, all worked together, and how it connected to their own bodies, the land around them, and ultimately to divinity. They saw expressions of the goddess and gods as divine feminine and divine masculine, supposedly in perfect balance to one another. They believed this was evident in human form, all of nature around them and the planets above. Their ancestors noticed that the movement of the moon, stars, and sun, and how they dictated the crops growing, the changing seasons, and they think ultimately their own lifespan. The continual cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth was perceived as the wheel of the year. You see, the sun worshippers' problem is this. They worship the creation, not the creator of the creation. And they call themselves gods and goddesses. This is the eternal dance of the goddess and god. Happy Beltane, everyone. Nothing perisheth, but as the sun and year, everything goes in a circle, lesser or greater, and is renewed and refreshed in its revolutions. Here's a quick reminder of the news stories appearing in the Illuminati-controlled mass media. They included it all of what I've just said. We had birth, Obama's birth certificate, revealed after Freemason Donald Trump had the honor of invoking this story and putting it back into the news media, big time. It was brought up hundreds of times before, but never by Freemason Donald Trump, which prompted the White House administration to actually release Obama's birth certificate, which everybody has been clamoring for, and of course, what a forged document that was. But it represented birth. April 27th was the date the White House released Obama's birth certificate, a couple of days before the royal wedding. The day before the royal wedding, April 28th, Barack Obama appears on the Oprah Winfrey Show to talk about the recent igniting of controversy around his place of birth, giving it even more FaceTime. Prince William and Kate are then married. They symbolize the union of one king, one people, marriage, birth, life, marriage, and death. That's next when I return on A View from Space on AM 640. Back in a moment.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with A View from Space on AM 640.
I'm a guy that calls Space. You can email me, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. CD writes, "Hi, Spaceman. I've recently started listening to your show via downloads, listening to the royal wedding shows. You said there'd be a blood sacrifice, and there was. Bin Laden. You've got another convert." I got many like that. And through the decade that I've been broadcasting on AM 640 Talk Radio with this show, I've actually called a lot of events. I would say almost countless. Some really big, some kind of big, and some smaller ones. But as I said earlier, it's easy to follow this group when you know the basic plan. The plan is to cause a third world war. Out of the destruction of this system that we have now, a new one will arrive. It's the phoenix. It's the myth of the phoenix. Out of the smoke and ashes of the old bird that burns up in a fiery conflagration, a new phoenix rises out of the ashes. And they're always in control of the next empire. They're already building the next empire. It is a cashless system, by the way, that will tell you something about gold and silver and currencies and the current rumors that even, as I spoke about not too long ago, that the EU would shrink from its current number of states to just 10. This week, Greece was rumored to have been thinking about leaving the Eurozone and going back to the drachma because of their in-debt problems. This is not just happening in Greece. Ireland is the same problem. Queen Elizabeth is now visiting there, the first monarch to visit, the first of this family to visit in 99 years and 10 months. Her grandfather was the last king of Ireland. Her father, Queen Elizabeth II's father, was only king of Ireland for 24 hours and summarily dumped by the Irish Parliament, becoming a republic. I believe their indebtedness is so bad now that very soon, on the coronation of Prince William to King, and whatever name he will choose, he will unify Wales, Britain, and Ireland. And then, as the EU has more and more troubles, because of this lifeboat that is able to launch to save the world, they will also ask him to be their king, and of course, have his backing. The machine of all of the banking institutes of the world. They are the ones who all of these countries owe all of the money to, and they're not done yet. They're driving all of the countries into heavy debt. very soon now the American dollar will crash, and Canada, the United States, and Mexico will form a union, the North American Union, and change to one currency also to protect itself from this oncoming onslaught on the world's economies, caused, of course, by the ones who have been doing the lending. So, as I was saying about the wheel of life, we had it all in these past few days. Obama's birth certificate, representing birth. The marriage, representing life. And, of course, on the very night of the high witching holiday Walpurgisnacht and its fire festival, Osama bin Laden is supposedly killed in a what? We're told a firefight. Symbolic, of course, of death. Then, the resurrection? Why, that was put into the media by the Vatican. Pope John Paul II is exhumed, dug up, brought back to life for sainthood, to be a saint and live forever. The resurrection. I also believe this is going to be repeated by Osama bin Laden himself, this resurrection cycle. This resurrection cycle of the green man come back to life. More on that in a few minutes on A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. How? Osama bin Laden will come back by speaking from his supposed grave via the recording that will be released, and soon. So in just a short 13-day period, the cycle of the wheel of the year is symbolically beamed throughout all of the world to witness and for all of the watchers to participate in. The cycle of birth, of life, of death, and of resurrection, all in the 13-day period. May 1st, last Monday, marked the festival of Beltane. This is a fire festival. This is a celebration of the rising tide of light, which is the sun, life, and love. Traditionally, Beltane has been celebrated throughout courtship and lovemaking. There's a maypole to represent this sacred masculine, and red ribbons spun around the tree to symbolize the divine feminine. Many weddings would take place on this day or close to it. And, as I've said, the royal wedding was that weekend, and it was referred to in the ancient times as hand fasting, not marriage. The couple would come together for a year and a day to see if they were an appropriate fit. It was also customary to jump over the fire on this day, from which the Rolling Stones' Jumpin' Jack Flash comes from. It's said that it is the darkest before the dawn, just before the sun up, is when it's darkest, with a conflict between the old and the new during this transition of ages, with numerous prophecies of destruction complete with Antichrist deception. Humanity has the intelligence and free will to alter such negative projections. Although the collective karma of the people is great, a return to the ways of nature is paramount for the restoration of balance, the Illuminati believe. The rediscovery of the secrets of alchemy promised to bring a spiritual revolution. This would also bring an energy revolution, since the knowledge relates to free energy technology. This is what's coming after oil, The discoveries that scientists are now making related to quantum physics and the unified field theory correspond directly to the resurrection of the occult belief of alchemy. I've described this before on A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio as science/black magic. The line between science and black magic is now so smeared, so vague, that it's hard to tell which is which. Right now, the idea of enlightenment or spiritual soul liberation is not widely recognized or even valued in the modern culture we're living in right now, where pursuit of the temporal and superficial overshadows fulfillment and the eternal. But the Illuminati are going to see to it that changes. That's what's called enlightenment. The Illuminati are pressing hard for the resurrection of this ancient belief of alchemy, what they claim to be vital knowledge. They believe that we've all been incarnated, put into bodies, at this momentous point in time to witness and participate in this grand cosmic drama. The Illuminati believe choices we all make will lay the foundation for our future destiny that holds the promise for the birth of a whole new global culture based on spiritual values. That means all of our religions, as we know today, must go. A new Luciferian spiritual religion is to take its place. Enlightenment. They believe all of humanity, or what's left of us when they're finished after the great cleansing, stands at the threshold of making the leap from Homo sapien to Homo luminous, or the illuminated being. The illuminated ones, the enlightened ones. Don't you get the feeling sometimes that the elites, these initiates, are playing a grand cosmic game? Don't you get the feeling you're living someone else's dream? That you're being manipulated? Let me take you back to last weekend. The weekend that did not appear on AM 640. The day after the royal wedding of Prince William and Catherine. The night of the wedding was, of course, the 29th. The next day was the Saturday, April 30th of April, also known as Walpurgis. I believe the Druids who are running the world, who also picked the wedding date, were also the ones who made sure it went flawlessly. Back with that when I return on A View from Space. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm Space. Back in a moment.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
Hello, Spaceman. This is A View from Space on AM 640. You want to communicate through email, please, at spaceman@640toronto.com or just simply space@640toronto.com. Just before the break, I was talking about the royal wedding taking place on the 29th. The next day, of course, was the Saturday, the 30th of April, also known as Walpurgis. And the evening is Walpurgis Nacht, going into Beltane, the high witching holiday of Beltane. As I said, I believe the Druids, who are the ones that are running our world, who also picked the wedding date, by the way, were also the ones who made sure it went flawlessly, meaning the arrest and detention of any potential protesters along the televised wedding procession route taken by the royals. This is why that Prince William and Catherine could ride in an open procession carriage that afforded no protection whatsoever. because every single person along that route were checked out and verified. They knew everyone who was there. What an incredible job it was, but then it cost, supposedly, millions and millions of dollars. It's what Queen Elizabeth II really meant when she made the comment after getting out of her car after returning from Westminster Abbey to the palace, where she simply said, and no one may talk to the Queen, by the way, unless spoken to first. So if she does not speak to you, the protocol is to keep your mouth shut. But she volunteered 2 words. She said simply, "It's amazing," meaning how smoothly and unblemished the whole wedding was presented to the billions watching without a single protester to mar it. Saturday was the day Buckingham Palace also made this announcement that the newly married couple would actually be delaying their honeymoon and would be spending the weekend, including the Monday, Beltane, at an undisclosed location somewhere in the UK. Well, I believe I know where that location was. I believe it was a place called Caernarfon Castle in Wales, which is, of course, said to be cursed. The architecture of Caernarfon Castle is unique in its design and decoration. King Edward, who was a very enthusiastic crusader, by the way, and the influence of the great city of Constantinople is easily visible in the castle's exterior walls with their bands of colored stone and angular towers. The Eagle Tower, most famous of these, has a triple cluster of turrets, each bearing a stone eagle symbolizing English dominance. If you'll notice, through the ages, through history, the eagle has always been the empire's dominant symbol. Rome had it on their globe. An eagle stood on top. The Russians have the double-headed eagle. Well, I believe an eagle is really a bird that is disguised cleverly as a phoenix. Now also, the Germans use the eagle. And now, today, of course, it's the American eagle with this soon-to-fall empire. If you go back far enough, you'll find that the eagle was the symbol of the tribe of Cain. What better way to hide the snake, the serpent, than with the symbol of a serpent eater, an eagle? Caernarfon Castle truly gained its place in English history when King Edward's son was born at that castle in 1284 and later crowned the first English Prince of Wales to become Edward II of England. In 1911, the castle again hosted the investiture of Prince of Wales, who became Edward VIII of the United Kingdom. The tradition was carried on with the crowning of Prince Charles as the Prince of Wales in 1969. It's been owned by the Crown, Caernarfon Castle, since its construction by King Edward I in the 13th century. It even goes back farther than that. Before it was built, this area, Caernarfon Castle, is also surrounded by myths relating to King Arthur and his druid mentor Merlin. Today it remains a landmark of both English and Welsh history. Prince Charles and Princess Diana went there to Caernarfon Castle right after their wedding, and Prince William was conceived there. I believe Prince William and Catherine were secretly whisked back there to play the roles of the May Queen and the Green Man in the Beltane Fire Festival ritual, always held on April 30th, their wedding evening. More on that. Beltane Ritual is coming up on A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. As Prince William plays the Green Man, and Catherine plays the May Queen. I believe the Druids have been waiting for this bloodline couple to play this particular role for more than 1,000 years. The public marriage was on the 29th, but the private occult ritual marriage occurred in front of their god on Saturday night, late last week, on the 30th. The royal number of 3 dropped to 0. Walpurgisnacht, or Hexennacht, meaning Witches' Night, is a traditional spring festival on April 30th to May 1st. That evening, in large parts of central northern Europe, its celebration is associated with dancing and with bonfires, of course, representing the sun. Fire is the sun's representative here on Earth. Walpurgisnacht is a holiday celebrated on that evening. The festival of Walpurgis is a night both of revelry and darkness. According to folklore tradition, it's time when the witches met on the Brocken mountain and held revels with their gods. Brocken is the highest of the Harz mountains of northern central Germany. It's known for the phenomenon of the Brocken specter. It's a magnified shadow of an observer, typically surrounded by rainbow-like bands throwing onto a bank of cloud in high mountain areas when the sun's low. The phenomenon was first reported on the Brocken. This was illustrated, by the way, in the Disney film Night on Witch Mountain. So the Illuminati are always putting their symbols into the public conscious. It's called predictive programming. The Illuminati believe that Walpurgis, like Halloween, is more than a time of ritual spell casting. It's a time when the barrier between our world and the supernatural world is more easily crossed, accessed. Walpurga and the rites of May reflect this, since this is a turning tide when the season is not quite one thing or another, a time in between time. It's very suitable for occult divination and spells, a time to take advantage of the thinner veils between the worlds, and the fact that our minds are temporarily focused away from everyday affairs and onto the magical energies of nature's spring tides. This is a time for looking into that which is coming into being, and which should be, for seeking deep roots of life knowledge and life mysteries, for love magic and spells of growth and change, conception and birth, and resurrection. In fact, for almost all the elements of what is often called women's magic. In the Norse tradition, Walpurgisnacht is considered the enclosure of the fallen. It commemorates the time when Odin, the Nordic god, died to retrieve the knowledge of the runes. And the night is said to be a time of weakness between the living and the dead. Bonfires were built to keep away the dead and chaotic spirits that were said to walk among the living then. This is followed by the return of light, and the sun is celebrated during May Day, May 1st. Due to St. Walpurga's holy day falling on the same day, her name became associated with the celebrations, and yes, it is a female, a goddess worship. Early Christianity had a policy of Christianizing pagan festivals, so it's by no accident that St. Walpurga's Day was set to May 1st. It was honored the same way that the Vikings celebrated spring as they spread through Europe. The two dates became mixed together and created the Walpurgisnacht celebration. Space back with more in just a minute on A View from Space. This is AM 640, Talk Radio.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
So Spaceman, AM 640 and A View from Space. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. This one from ENA. Hey, Space, I'm sure you're already aware, but in keeping with your Osama Beltane link, Osama was not the only one killed in this day. What are your thoughts on this article? I have a link to a newspaper article that the United States announces the death of Osama the same day of the year as the death of Adolf Hitler is announced. Not proven, just announced, just put into people's minds that Adolf Hitler had died. I believe that Hitler actually escaped. Have done a 4-hour show on it. Hope to replay that this summer sometime as I take a 2-week vacation. So if you haven't heard that, listen for the death of Adolf Hitler on A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. ENA finish off their email by saying, we've been looking forward to your show for a couple of weeks. Glad you're back with us. Of course, Adolf Hitler supposedly killed himself on that day that Osama also was supposedly killed. Beltane. The Beltane Festival is also called Walpurgisnacht. It's the highest day on the Druidic witches' calendar, while May 1st is the Illuminati's second most sacred holiday of them all. Halloween, or Samhain, is the very first, of course. Human sacrifice is required emotionally and physically. Since the celebration officially began the night before Beltane, the tradition has developed among occultists to celebrate Beltane as a 2-day ceremony. This is what I believe the Druids did with Prince William and Catherine as their star performers. They had been waiting so long for this particular couple to come along. They're finally here, they believe. This tradition was strong enough that Adolf Hitler supposedly killed himself on April 30th at 3:30 p.m., creating a 333 in numerology and placing his suicide sacrifice within the Beltane time frame. You see, in witchcraft, numbers have power. And you can multiply the power of these numbers as much as 3 times. The highest possible magnification of a number and a spell is 3. That's why April 30th at 3:30 to give a 333. The modern Beltane Fire Festival is inspired by the ancient Gaelic festival of Beltane, which began on the evening before May 1st, marks the beginning of summer. Now, the main event of the festival is the procession of performers starting at the Twin Pillars. Yes, you heard me correctly. The Twin Pillars, the Twin Towers. You see, before Noah and the flood, there was a man called Lamech. This Lamech, and there are 2 Lamechs, you cannot get them confused, you must know the difference. This Lamech had 2 wives. By the way, he was the first polygamist. The sun worshipper's way of life. Multi-wives. That is a sun worshipper's style of life. And it has never been wiped out because they're keeping it around on purpose to reinstate it. It is coming back. So the first polygamist was Lamech. He had a couple of wives, one named Adah, by whom he had a couple of sons, one named Jabal and the other named Jubal. His other wife was called Zillah. She bore one son named Tubal-Cain and one daughter named Naamah. And these 4 children founded the beginnings of all of the sciences of the world. Remember I told you about science and black magic coming together. Here is the beginning of the sciences. Jabal, the oldest son, founded science of geometry, and his brother Jubal found the science of music and song using a tongue harp and organ. And the third brother, Tubal-Cain, found the science called blacksmithing, which crafted things of gold, silver, iron, copper, and steel. The daughter founded the art of weaving, and these persons, knowing full well that the true God would destroy this information that they gathered either by fire or water, so they wrote down the knowledge given to them by Satan and hid it into great pillars of stone that would be found after the great flood. Since stone would not burn with fire or be drowned and destroyed with water, these pillars were called laterns because it would not drown with water. The latern, spelt L-T-E-R-N-E-S, is described in other ancient writings as laterns, usually translated into the word brick. The Enlightenment is in there. That's where we get the word lantern from. But marble does not resist fire. Brick, especially early unscientifically vitrified brick, does not resist water. If the word be considered a perversion of Latin, which means brass or bronze, then the ancient legendary pillars that contain the hidden information of the sciences would have been made of metal and marble. A more sensible idea, since metal would resist fire. Marble would resist water. So make it of both. And the ancient city of Tyre was the great temple of Hercules, with 2 pillars, one of gold, the other one was made of smaragdus, a polished green marble. Other Tyrian temples of Melkarth, for instance, had 2 metal pillars or 2 monoliths. Even in today's modern masonry, they have hollow pillars to serve as safe repositories for their archives of masonry and to preserve them from flood and fire just as their ancestors did. This is also, in 2001, A Space Odyssey, what is meant by the black rectangle. Black is knowledge in the spiritual realm. Now that black tower, that black rectangle in that motion picture represents knowledge. Now the modern Masonic initiate is taught in the two pillars. There is the means by which he may travel a little farther, a little higher towards the secret middle chamber of life in which dwells the unseen presence. As you may or may not know, the very head of all Freemasonry is the monarchy of England. Why? Well, they are the supposed descendants of these ancient people I've just spoke about, the descendants of the tribe of Cain. Now, Tubal-Cain, I've said this before, has a symbol, 2 balls, a circle and another circle, and a cane beside it, shaped exactly like a 7. A cane, a stick with a handle. Put together, it's 007. The symbol of Tubal-Cain. Now, the public ritual is performed every year at the Acropolis, also known as the National Monument, which is located at the top of Calton Hill, just east of Edinburgh in Scotland. It was designed by Robert Charles Cockerell and his collaborator William Henry Playfair, and it's modeled after the Parthenon in Athens. The participants perform a ritual drama based on some aspects of the pre-Christian festival of Beltane and other mythologies from ancient cultures. The fertility of the land and the animals is celebrated and encouraged, led by one of the Blue Men. You've heard of them before, I'm sure. The Blue Men group. Remember? They're famous, but maybe you weren't aware of their origin. Well, this is it. The Blue Men are the procession's guides and guards in the Beltane May Queen dance with the Green Man. So the Blue Men are the procession's guards and guides. The Green Man, in winter guise, appears through the columns, played by Prince William, I believe, in front of all of the highest-ranking druids and bloodline. You've heard of them recently, too. They have manifested themselves into the public conscious mind, too. The Green Man. Where? Why, the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. May 2nd, the day after Beltane. Remember, Beltane is when the Green Man is killed. Exactly when the NHL made some strange decision to limit their fans, meaning these two Green Men. They used to sit right at the penalty box spot. So when the player went into the penalty box in the NHL playoffs in Vancouver, they would see the Green Man sitting directly beside them, and they would go through all kinds of antics, getting all kinds of FaceTime on television. The Green Man appearing right at Beltane, and then the day after Beltane, killed, removed from the penalty box area. Oh yes, still at the game. Oh, for sure. They appeared the other night in Nashville. And of all places, seating just in front of Nicole Kidman and her husband, country star Keith Urban, who own the Nashville Predators. Country Music does. Gaylord Corporation. It owns Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman, the Hollywood starlet, the monarch butterfly that she is, played along with the Green Man, giving them even more power with the audiences. Two superstars loving the Green Man on Beltane. More on the Green Man, the May Queen, next on A View from Space on AM 640.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with A View from Space on AM 640.
The guy that calls Space, you can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Thanks so much for the ones I've received this evening. Quite a load tonight. Many asking, where were you? And many more with absolutely incredible, fascinating insights. And as usual, the people that send me all the links to the stories of the Pakistanis, for example, not believing for one moment that Osama bin Laden was killed. More on that is coming up on A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. But back to the Blue Men, the Green Man, and the May Queen. You know, the May Queen is in the lyrics of the Stairway to Heaven. Led Zeppelin song that tops all of the best rock songs of all time lists? Oh yes, Beltane is mentioned in there. And it's she, not a he, climbing the stairway. As I said a couple of weeks ago, the wedding was all about Catherine, was not about Prince William. That will be on his coronation when he is made king. But for now, Beltane, a woman's magic is performed. Now, there's the Blue Men. I told you about the Blue Men. They are the procession's guides and guards. The Green Man appears in winter guise. He appears through the columns. And next comes the Nead fire. It is kindled. This is the making of fire by traditional methods, too. And all fire seen on the night is produced from this first flame. All fires around the countryside must be taken from this flame at this hilltop. And there are many May Queens, many hilltops, many fires from which people will get their embers, carry it to their homes to begin their fire again. This ritual is also repeated with the Halloween, or on Halloween, and with the Olympic torch flame also. The torchbearers and processional drummers are next to pass in between the two pillars, the two twin towers, the pillars of Hercules, just like the ones that Barack Obama announced Osama bin Laden's death standing in front of. They're followed by the white warrior women, and finally by the star of the show, the May Queen. A horn signals the May Queen and her birth, and the drums begin. The May Queen and her white women, 4 of who are her handmaidens, proceed to be born of the earth, greet the 4 cardinal directions in back bends, and bow to the crowd of spectators in 3 directions. After they finally acknowledge the earth and the sky, the Green Man, who has been watching this from the ground, is allowed to approach the May Queen at the very top. She accepts him as her consort, and the procession begins, led by the May Queen, of course. Now remember, I believe that after the wedding, Catherine and Prince William were whisked away to Carnarvon Castle, to a very private sanctuary where this ritual occurred. It's been done millions of times throughout the centuries, but this one, with these 2 participants playing the May Queen and the Green Man, is the most powerful in thousands of years. The 4 handmaidens, white women, bodyguards and processional drummers then join the May Queen and the Green Man, and all are flanked by torchbearers and stewards and guided and protected by 4 blue men on the footpath to the May Queen. This footpath reaches an intersection, a crossroads, a crux, a cross, where the Queen, the May Queen, spins to decide which direction to turn in, always choosing the left-handed path, which leads to the fire arch. Between the intersection and arch, the handmaidens and the white women stir the air with their wands, gathering the energies of the earth, while the drummers change rhythms to indicate the difference in purpose. At the fire arch, the guardians first greet the May Queen and the Green Man, who perform a dance, which represents the rituals necessary to open a path into the underworld. As the procession passes through the fire arch, the handmaidens and the white women become extremely sensitive in perception. They begin to mourn the losses of the world over the past year. This continues until the procession reaches the point of the element of air. At the element of air point, performers representing the element of air put on a display for the May Queen and Green Man and present them with a gift. Having awakened air, the May Queen leads the procession through the point and around the side of the mound to the earth point, which is in the midst of a stand of trees. Trees, you see, are sacred to the Druids. The Druids believe the trees house spirits who've been around for centuries and have witnessed all of the Druids' diabolical rituals through time. They were the ones who put the avenue of trees into Westminster Abbey for Prince William and Catherine to walk down during their wedding procession. More dancers and acrobats perform for the May Queen and Green Man in the grove of sacred trees, and they are presented with a bannock bread before the procession continues again, passing through the point and around to Water Point on the northern side as they go through all of the elements of the world. On the northern side of the grove is the Water Point. Again, a ritual performance occurs here, including the washing of the May Queen and the Green Man's faces in the dew. After this points, a gift is again presented. The procession heads then on to the Fire Point. Again, dancers and acrobats perform and offer the May Queen and Green Man gifts. The procession wends its way to a lower footpath, where the handmaidens and white women begin gathering the energies of the awakening earth and sending them deep into the earth mound. The procession pauses below at an observatory spot to watch a fire point display, and then another gift is then presented to the May Queen and Green Man. Once awakened by the power of the May Queen, the elements do not follow the procession, but are drawn towards each other and move from their points towards a place where they can gather and unify, which is symbolic for restoring the natural order. Having awakened the four elements, the May Queen decides the procession and guides around the western side of the mound. The first of the red men then appear. These are imps, created with the May Queen's appearance at the twin towers representing the forces of chaos. The imps spot the procession as it passes below and are attracted to the May Queen and her warriors. Remember, these twin towers, these pillars, represent Jubals and Jabals, towers that they built to hide the sciences from the true God. That's also the origin of the Pillar of Hercules. As the procession rounds the hill, the red men begin to taunt the white women and then stage a series of charges at them. As the procession reaches the base of the mound on the south side of the Twin Towers, as you can see, everyone is becoming sexually aroused. This represents the red men's interest in capturing the May Queen on behalf of their lord, the Green Man. The white women ward the red men off in the end without killing any of them, as any unnecessary deaths would lead to a lessening of the energies needed to bring about the change of the seasons from winter to summer. One significant, very important change, I believe, took place at this point in this year's ritual of 2011, with the two highest representing the bloodline of the tribe of Cain playing the role of Green Man and the May Queen, Prince William and Catherine. The change these two were able to bring is not just a change in the seasons, but a change in the world. By that I mean a new economic, political, and religious change that I've been talking about over the years on AM 640 Talk Radio, on A View from Space. The procession finally completes the full circle, arriving back at the path intersection, the crossroads, the crux, the cross symbol. The procession then turns to cross over the top of the mound, through the Twin Towers, and down into a valley where a stage has been set up for the final display. Remember, in Masonry, walking past the two towers, inside them, takes you to the unknown spirit inside. The handmaidens perform a ritual to cleanse the stage, while the torchbearers, stewards and white women, form a circle around the open space surrounding the stage. The May Queen and the Green Man mount this special stage, and the May Queen begins her ritual to awaken the earth to the new season. And this ritual of 2011 on Beltane, not a new season, but a new world order. While she and her husband and her handmaidens and the white women begin to spin and focus their energies, they've been gathering through the night. The red men are allowed to approach the stage and circle it, increasing the power even further. More in a moment. On the conclusion of the Beltane Fire Festival with the May Queen and the Green Man is next on A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio.
You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman, exercising the rights to free speech while he still can, on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640, View from Space on Talk Radio. You can email me at spaceman@640toronto.com or simply space@640toronto.com. The very sexual conclusion, the culmination of the ritual of the May Queen and the Green Man on Beltane has the May Queen and her handmaidens and the white women beginning to spin and focusing their energies that they've been gathering through the evening. The red men are then allowed to approach the stage and circle it, increasing the power even further of the sexual energy. Overcome with the May Queen's beauty and goaded by the presence of the red men, the Green Man can no longer resist the sexual temptation and catches the May Queen. This act is strictly forbidden, and the Green Man is ritually and immediately killed by the handmaidens, lifted and turned anti-clockwise, symbolically speaking, turning to the left-handed path. His bulky, wintry form stripped away and thrown to the red men. He is then turned clockwise and then presented to the May Queen. The May Queen takes pity on the Green Man in this ritual and brings him back to life, like a young sapling breaking the earth after winter's hoarfrost has melted away. Overwhelmed by the new life that fills him, the Green Man dances, presenting himself to the four directions, repeating the actions of the May Queen from the beginning of the procession. The May Queen then crowns the Green Man and leads the procession up the mound to the bonfire on a high northern point, where the Twin Towers stand. The white women, the red men, surround the bonfire, making an outer and middle layer, respectively 2 circles, with the handmaidens forming the innermost circle. A set of wax hands are then lit, and the May Queen and the Green Man make their way into the very center of the reds and whites. They walk around the bonfire with the lit wax hands 3 times. On the 4th circuit, they light the bonfire with their flaming hands in 4 places. They then walk 3 more times around the bonfire as the Beltane blessing is announced to the gathered people. The lighting of the bonfire is representative of the sun, of course. It signals the end of winter and the coming of summer. But this particular ritual this year of Beltane 2011 signals the end of the old world and the beginning of the new world. And the Green Man's old form is symbolically cast into the fire, just as this old world and its system will be cast into a conflagration of fire. On this same time, the stage is occupied by Fire Point. This symbolizes the old tradition where farmers would drive their herds between 2 bonfires at this time of year to bless them. Once the bonfire is lit, the procession then passes through the crowds to the May Queen's bower on the side of the mound below and behind the Twin Towers, where the procession can finally relax. The Fire Arch Guardians formally present their gift to the May Queen and Green Man, and hand fastings or weddings are held as the couples are blessed and jump together over the willow switch withies of the Blue Man, representing a commitment which will last throughout all the trials for a year and a day. After this, the 4 elements and other groups formally present their gifts to the May Queen and Green Man, and the red men are presented before the handmaidens and white women. Symbolically, they seduce or are seduced by the white women and handmaidens, representing a union between the White Order and the Red Chaos. The rest of the performers are then invited into the Bower Circle, and finally, so are all the spectators. They represent the rest of the world's population, you see, in this symbolic dance, to dance and celebrate the arrival of summer. Again, in this 2011 ritual, the symbolic arrival is not of summer, but of the New World Order. And when the rest of the performers are invited into the Bower Circle, and then finally the spectators also, a great sexual orgy is performed. After walking through the Twin Towers, now you know the reason why the World Trade Center Twin Towers had to be invoked at this time of year to tie it all in with this wedding, the ritual at Beltane with the May Queen and the Green Man that have the lifeboat for the world, and with the New World Order to follow on this same weekend. Who would have ever thought possible that 9/11 would be invoked right after the royal wedding? Well, I for one, because I knew for sure once this fairy tale wedding had been completed, it would be back to business for the Illuminati. And was it ever back to business? Incredible happenings, or supposedly incredible happenings manifest themselves. The only way to conjure up and tie in the Illuminati's 9/11 event with the wedding and the Beltane festival was to symbolically kill the one who is known as the world's greatest terrorist, Osama bin Laden, which they did. It doesn't matter at all if he was really and truly killed on Beltane that Sunday night or not in Pakistan. It's all about perception, not truth. What people perceive becomes their truth. Then the target is then done. It's picked. Well, you see, when perception becomes truth, then you really have gotten rid of the one thing that will stop people from going to war for you, which is they know the truth. So you must trick them or fool them in order to get the world's populations to fight one another. That's what this perception and in erasing the real truth is all about. The Illuminati-controlled mass media is doing it all. It can convince everyone, if given time, that he was killed. Osama bin Laden was killed then. Repetition is the best form of brainwashing. So if it's repeated over and over and over and over, it will soon be perceived as truth. So, regardless of the silly inconsistencies that are now coming out about the so-called SEALs Team 6, as they're called, why that name? The first letter of each word is S for SEALs, T for team, S for 6. S, T, S. It points to STS Flight 134, which is to be the second last shuttle flight to the International Space Station, which will soon be completed. It's a control room in the sky to bring about the new Atlantis, or the New World Order as it's called. It's cleverly hidden in the entire fleet of shuttles built for this job. The mission statement: a Colombian enterprise to endeavor for the discovery of Atlantis, and all other challengers will be destroyed. Atlantis, you see, the new Atlantis, is what they call this new world order, this new global system that's coming. One globe, one people, one king. Exactly as Atlantis was. It also has the intended symbology of the head wound, which will be suffered by the Antichrist, which, when he resurrects from the dead, will change his entire persona completely as he becomes possessed by Satan himself, the spirit that brings him alive. Gabrielle Giffords, the Arizona congresswoman, who was shot in the head, and, according to CNN, died, but then had to retract it, and they had to say that she was now alive. So she actually died and came back to life, if you were watching real time on that Saturday afternoon. At first she was reported dead. Then she was later reported to be alive. She's also the wife of Mark Kelly, the commander of STS-134, who is not yet lifted off, but as this coming Tuesday is the next possible date to launch to the International Space Station. Mark Kelly's twin brother Scott was to originally have been on board the ISS when Mark got there on this trip, symbolically reflecting, of course, that I brought up a couple of weeks ago on the show, the two suns in the sky legend of the Hopi Indian, about two suns appearing in the sky, heralding the end of the age, as one superstar out there explodes and causes a incredible light in the sky that will burn for days, making it look as though we had two suns. But that's all put away now because of the delay after delay after delay with the discovery prevented this from happening. Everything that's been going on lately is working on so many different levels. Barack Obama kicks off his presidential campaign, and immediately, what happens? Bin Laden is killed in a special ops mission. Obama then turns up at Ground Zero in New York, laying a wreath where the Twin Towers once stood for the victims of that attack. He spends all day there with a photo op. The Illuminati-controlled mass media is there following him around for one of the best photo ops he'll ever get. Invoking 9/11 right after Beltane. Space back with more in a moment on A View from Space on AM 640.
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm Space. This is A View from Space. Thanks for the emails. You can communicate, by the way, by email at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Just before the break, I was talking about how the connection was made from the royal wedding, Beltane, directly to 9/11. And, of course, Barack Obama was the key as he announces that Osama bin Laden, the world's greatest terrorist, had been killed at a raid in a Pakistani fortress, basically built for bin Laden, who had supposedly been living there since 2005, but there are so many, let's call them unfacts, because we don't know if they're fact or not. No one will ever know. No one will ever get to the bottom of this. It can never be found out. So perception is everything, and that means the battle is on for the mind to convince you of what to believe and to convince you who the enemy is and to convince you to fight the enemy. That's all in our very near future, I believe. Now, during the same time as Obama is announcing the death of bin Laden and 9/11 is invoked, of course, you remember the United States of America had a very close partner in crime after the 9/11 attacks as they invaded Iraq and then Afghanistan, and it was Great Britain. So during this same time that this was all going down in America this past weekend, here's what was happening in Britain. After 5.5 years of sifting through the evidence, the judge had delivered her verdict. Yes, it was a woman, of course, since this is deemed to be women's magic time that comes with the high witching Sabbat of Beltane. It was the London 7/7 bombings, front and center in the British media this week, all this week. What immaculate timing, won't you agree? This was in lockstep with what the United States was experiencing also this very week. 9/11, their terrorist attack, as the UK was going through their terrorist attack. The London 7/7 bombings in the Tube. And of of course, the United States with 9/11 at the Twin Towers. Both countries who partnered in the Iraqi invasion had memories of their so-called al-Qaeda attacks, again conjured up by the Illuminati mass-controlled media immediately after Osama bin Laden is reportedly killed in a commando raid in Pakistan on the weekend. The timing is absolutely uncanny, don't you think? Now, if I told you that Prince William and Catherine were to be married, before it all ever goes down, that right after the wedding, they would tie it in after the Beltane Festival of the Twin Towers, the May Queen and the Green Man, they would tie it in with the Twin Towers of 9/11. And not only in America, but the 7/7 bombings would be timed just so perfectly that the inquiry had concluded after 5½ years of sifting through evidence, and this very same week, the judge delivers her verdict. Would you say a coincidence there? The conclusion was made at the inquest by Lady Justice Hallett into the deaths of the 52 innocent people killed and the 700 wounded. Yes, all sevens. July, a 7. On the 7th, a 7. 2005, a 7. 52 innocent people killed, a 7. 700 wounded, a 7. At the hands of terrorists, we're told. Recorded a verdict of unlawful killing. Yes, they all died unlawfully, but Lady Justice Hallett cleared rescuers and security services of any failings. This is important because, you see, the London 7/7 bombings, just as the 9/11 attack on the Twin Towers, were both inside jobs to foment this global war that's coming, pitting one side against the other. Do the deceitful deed and then point the finger and say they did it. And I have no doubts there are Islamic terrorists, and there are terrorists on our side. They're both evil, and they both work for the Illuminati because, you see, they control both sides. That's how the outcome can be controlled. So, security services were exonerated of any failure whatsoever. Same story as the United States inquiry, the 9/11 Commission it was called. This outraged the families of the victims in Britain, just as the actions by the United States government at the 9/11 Commission had done with the American victims' families in America. A set of 9 recommendations was made by the coroner in the London 7/7 bombings, but the families of the victims have said they do not go near far enough. Exactly the same sentiments as the American victims' families. The British families, victims, have demanded that Home Secretary Theresa May should review the whole operation of the security services, not just MI5, who was exonerated and checked over. The London 7/7 bombings were designed to do the same job in the UK as the 9/11 event was to do in America. The London bombings had the same suspicious anomalies that America's 9/11 had. I covered these in July of 2005 on A View from Space on AM 640. Talk radio. I covered those London 7/7 bombings and those incredible anomalies. I quote, "At 9:30 this morning, we were actually running an exercise for a company over 1,000 people in London based on simultaneous bombs going off precisely at the railway stations where it happened this morning. So I still have the hairs on the back of my neck standing up right now." The words were from former Scotland Yard official Peter Power, spoken on BBC Radio July 7th, 2005. I'll say the quote again. At 9:30 this morning, we were actually running an exercise for a company of over 1,000 people in London based on simultaneous bombs going off precisely at the railway stations where it happened this morning. So I still have hairs on the back of my neck standing up right now. This is the same exact scenario that happened in America. Listen, FEMA arrived in New York on September 10th, the day before the attack, to set up a command post located at Pier 29. Yes, and 11. Under the auspices of a biowarfare exercise scheduled for September 12th, the next day. This explains why Tom Kenny of FEMA's National Urban Search and Rescue Team told Dan Rather of CBS News that FEMA had arrived in New York on the night of September 10th. And this was originally dismissed, by the way, as a slip of the tongue. Now back to the many strange facts from highly credible sources that have come in pertaining to the London 7/7 bombings. The most astonishing is the conversation which took place the afternoon of the London bombing on BBC Radio that I've just mentioned. The BBC host interviewed Peter Power, managing director of Visor Consultants, which bills itself as a crisis management advice company. I would call them Illuminati insiders. Peter Power was a former Scotland Yard official, by the way. That conversation and the way it went on the BBC Radio that day, that eventful day of July 7th, 2005, on a return on A View from Space. This is Talk Radio, AM 640.
Ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole into today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on AM 640.
I'm the guy that calls space. This is A View from Space. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Now, here's the conversation, the way it went, with a BBC host interviewing Peter Power, managing director of Visor Consultants, the morning of the London 7/7 bombings. Power said the quote I've already quoted you. 9:30 this morning, we're actually running an exercise for a company over 1,000 people in London based on simultaneous bombs going off precisely at the railway stations where it happened this morning. So I still have the hairs on the back of my neck standing up right now. Host says, to get this quite straight, you were running an exercise to see how you would cope with this, and it happened while you were running the exercise? Power. Precisely. And it was about 9:30 this morning. We planned this for a company, and for obvious reasons I don't want to reveal their name, but they're listening and they know it. And we had a room full of crisis managers for the first time they'd met. So within 5 minutes, we'd made a pretty rapid decision that this is the real one, and so we went through the correct drills of activating crisis management procedures to jump from slow time to quick time thinking. There was even an audio clip from the BBC website, but this clip was removed 1 week after the original broadcast. Then Mr. Power repeats these statements on ITN television. When there's an emergency, like the London bombings, the public instinctively turns to professionals for help. Peter Power was managing director at a London-based consulting firm that specialized in crisis management, Visor Consultants they're called, which on the morning of July 11 was coincidentally running a security exercise for a private firm, simulating multiple bomb explosions in the London Underground at the same stations that were subsequently attacked in real life. Why didn't these astounding statements draw front-page coverage on both the UK and the US newspapers and television newscasts? And why is Peter Power now backtracking on some of his earlier comments? This situation is strikingly similar to a situation on 9/11, which would have made front-page headlines that was reported in the Boston Globe. In what the government describes as a bizarre coincidence, one U.S. intelligence agency was planning an exercise last September 11th in which an errant aircraft would crash into one of its buildings. But the cause wasn't terrorism. It was to be a simulated accident. Officials at the Chantilly, Virginia-based National Reconnaissance Office had scheduled an exercise that very morning in which a small corporate jet would crash into one of the 4 towers of the agency's headquarters building after experiencing mechanical failure. The agency is about 4 miles from the runway of Washington's Dulles International Airport. So it was just a short hop for the National Reconnaissance Office team to run over and secure the Pentagon. And by the way, the National Reconnaissance Office has a budget estimated to be 3 times that of the United States State Department. So, Reuters news service reported on the explosives used in the London bombing. The report said this: the explosives appear to be of military origin. This is the explosions in the London 7/7 bombings. The explosives appear to be of military origin, which is very worrying, says Christophe Chabot, head of the French Anti-Terrorism Coordination Unit, and one of 5 top officials sent by Paris to London immediately after London's attacks. A single bomb maker using high-grade military explosives is believed to be responsible for building the 4 devices that killed more than 50 people. It was 52 to be exact. The Times can reveal similar components from the explosive devices have been found at all 4 murder sites, leading detectives to believe that each of the 10-pound rucksack bombs that were used was the work of one man. And they also believe that the materials used were not homemade, but sophisticated military explosives, possibly smuggled into Britain from the Balkans. Then, MSNBC misinforms everyone that the note posted on an alleged Al-Qaeda-related website claiming responsibility for the bombings may be phony. MSNBC TV translator Jacob Kyriakis, who said that a copy of the message was later posted on a secular website, noted that the claim of responsibility for the London 7/7 bombings contained an error in one of the Quranic verses it cited. That suggests that the claim may be phony, he said. This is not something Al-Qaeda would do, make a mistake on a Quran verse quote. And the highly respected Financial Times newspaper in London had an article titled "Blair Rejects Calls for Probes into Bombings." It said Tony Blair will reject conservative demands for a government inquiry into last week's London bomb attacks, insisting such a move would distract from the task of catching the perpetrators. Does this make any sense? Why would an investigation, why wouldn't an investigation help to prevent something like that from happening again, if everything were above board? Blair's stance was strikingly similar to the early opposition by both President George W. and Vice President Dick Cheney to the establishment of an independent commission to probe 9/11. If you were skeptical at all about these events being inside jobs, the conspiracy theories, and a cover-up for both designed to concoct a reason to launch an attack on Iraq, then Afghanistan next, you must now concede that there is ample evidence to suggest that this is a very distinct possibility. Especially since the Brits and the Americans were in lockstep with the way they handled things and the anomalies that happened in both the 9/11 attack and the London 7/7 bombings. Just a one-off event can motivate an entire country to go to war. So all you need is one event. Not like this has never been done before. Through history, there are many times you will see false flag attacks, as they're called. The bin Laden death story, too, operates on so many anomalies and so many levels also. Typical of the Illuminati, confusion makes it so that once you have no idea what really happened, then you're open to be easily convinced on one side or the other, all depending on what your slant is. The propaganda machine the Illuminati control, they believe they're going to win this propaganda war, and everyone is going to finally accept the official story, which is not the real story at all, but the prefabricated story, to pit one side of the world against the other. This bin Laden death announcement is not only for the consumption of the West either, but also for the Muslim world. The desired reaction of the elites is to incite hatred from both sides. The Muslims against the Jews and Christians. I'm talking about bringing the Crusades back. The desired outcome is a third world war. Then the rebuilding of a new global system. First, the perception from the West. As you're probably obviously already aware, more and more so-called intelligence was released in the media. The more information, the more convoluted and inconsistent it became this week on the bin Laden killing. As an emailer of mine wrote, "People, the pictures of dead Osama are too gruesome. You can't handle it. Go watch Saw 1, 2, 3, or 5. Play bloodbath video games instead." If they really did find him, they would not have had the orders to kill him. They would have had the orders to take him alive. Would he not be full of valuable intelligence information as the enemy of the world? What a joke. The former Pentagon dinner guest, Anwar al-Awlaki, is said to be bin Laden's replacement. Speaking of fairy tales, Remember Jessica Lynch, the woman in the Iraqi War? They even made a movie about her. U.S. Special Ops Forces rescue this captured private Jessica Lynch from Saddam Hussein's Operations Forces Hospital near Nasiriyah. Remember the story? They gave her the Bronze Star as a hero. According to the Pentagon, the rescue was a classical special forces raid with U.S. commandos and Black Hawk helicopters blasting their way through Iraqi resistance in and out of the medical compound, and a very split-second timing assault, snatch and grab and dash, and out they went. It was later proven to be a hoax, a total hoax. It was used as a morale booster for the American people during the dark days of the Iraqi War. Or how about the story of the babies that were dumped out of incubators onto the floor of the Baghdad hospital by Saddam Hussein's soldiers? Another story that turned out to be a lie. Remember, the first casualty of war is truth. Space. Out of View from Space on AM 640. This is Talk Radio.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with a view from space on AM 640.
Spaceman, AM 640, and a view from space. You'd like to email? Just simply write spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Yes, writes, my theory is Bin Laden died in Tora Bora, and the guy we have been seeing since then was a media double of him. That media double was in fact killed in the Compod raid this last weekend. So from the perception of media and what we have come to know as Bin Laden, he died. It wasn't the Bin Laden who fought the Russians, but it was the one we invented after 9/11. MG writes, the town of Abbottabad in British Raj was the headquarters of the Hazara district during the British rule of India. It was named after Major James Abbott, who founded the town and district in January of 1853 after the annexation of Punjab, the province of Punjab. He remained the first deputy commissioner of the Hazara district from 1849 until April of 1853. Major Abbott is noted for having written a poem called Abbottabad before he went back to Britain, in which he wrote of his fondness for the town and his sadness at having to leave it. Abbottabad became and is still an important military cantonment and sanatorium, being the headquarters of a brigade of the 2nd Division of the Northern Army Corps. The garrison is made up of 4 battalions of native infantry, Gurkhas, and frontier force, and 4 native mountain batteries. The Gurkhas, it's said, are the best fighters in the world. Now, I don't know how true that is. That's just their reputation. And Abbottabad is one of their regiment homes. An abbot, of course, is not only the name of a general from which the town is named, but an abbot is also meaning father. So, it really doesn't matter if Bin Laden died or not. It's the perception. That's my take. But I have a sinking feeling. The U.S. invaded some random person's house, killing the people inside, and covered the crime with this whole bin Laden story. Because, you see, the people that run the world are truly evil. Bin Laden was engaged in a firefight with those that entered the area of the house he was in, we're told, and whether or not he got off any rounds, I quite frankly don't know, says Brennan this past Monday. Other Pentagon officials told the same story earlier in the day. Brennan is Pentagon spokesman. Then later in the day, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney said that the al-Qaeda leader was not armed. But Brennan earlier, a few hours before, said that bin Laden was engaged in a firefight. And they're not sure whether he got off any rounds or not before he got hit. But Jay Carney says he was not armed, so they really started convoluting and confusing you. White House Press Secretary Jay Carney, by the way, was a part of the very carefully chosen press corps on board George W. Bush's presidential aircraft, Air Force One, in 2001 on September 11th. Yes, Jay Carney, who is now the press secretary to the White House for Barack Obama, was on board, chosen to be on the press team, to fly to Florida that day when George W. was reading the little story about the goat to the children when the first tower was hit. So Jay Carney is very used to espousing the party line. Pakistani officials have even suggested that there wasn't even a shot fired in the raid, which contradicts the U.S. government's assertion that an al-Qaeda henchman were firing indiscriminately at the special ops teams. And what about the Pakistani people? The whole special ops mission was illegal. Actually illegal according to international law. The United States supposedly did not tell or ask the Pakistani government for permission if they could even enter Pakistani airspace. I've said many times, the Pakistani government is just as bin Laden is or was. Business associates with the American government. Business associates. You know the bin Laden name? He's Saudi Arabian. The bin Laden family is an elite, rich Saudi family. The bin Ladens run a construction company. How big? Well, when the king of Saudi Arabia wants to build a castle, a palace, the bin Laden construction company is chosen for the job. They build all of King Abdullah's palaces. And his shipyards, all of his automated shipyards. It's the bin Laden construction company. The elite builders of the world, who are Freemasons. They are the builders of the world. The Illuminati control both sides. That's how you control the outcome. Then there's the details about the use of a woman as a human shield. They've also been chopped and changed multiple times. At a Pentagon briefing early this week, a senior defense official said bin Laden was hiding behind a woman so he could get shots away at the U.S. soldiers. He was firing behind her, this official said. No name, of course. This was then expounded upon by Brennan, the spokesperson for the Pentagon, who said bin Laden was hiding behind women who were put in front of him as a shield. A woman killed in the raid was bin Laden's wife, Brennan said. She was positioned in a way that indicated that she was being used as a shield. Yet later, that account was altered by another Pentagon official who claimed bin Laden's wife was injured but not killed, and that a different guy's wife was killed. Then yet another official familiar with the operation said it did not appear that any woman was used as a human shield whatsoever. Then the next day, Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney again said that when bin Laden was approached, the al-Qaeda's leader's wife rushed the U.S. forces. The woman was shot in the leg but not killed. Conveniently, this wife who was dead, but then not dead, has also now identified bin Laden's body both to the Navy SEALs and Pakistani authorities. You know, the body they dumped in the sea. And the Pakistani authorities that were not involved, but were then involved, and then were not involved again. Brennan's assertion, the Pentagon spokesperson, that bin Laden's son Khalid was killed in the attack was also inconsistent because the official White House transcript on the record briefing states that it was a different son named Hamza who was actually killed. Why the Pentagon spokesman Brennan had gotten these fundamental details wrong is very mystifying, given that he was one of the officials supposedly watching the entire raid via a live video feed, as was President Barack Obama, we're told. Then the head of the CIA, Panetta, later admits that there was no live video footage on the raid on Osama bin Laden at all. As even further doubts emerge as to the validity of the United States version of events. The White House also had to abandon the story that Obama and his national security team watched tensely as events unfolded in real time on their closed-circuit television set, despite the White House having released photos of the team supposedly watching tensely. Think about it. You get a bunch of special ops soldiers together. Tell them to go into this house, kill this guy bin Laden, then get out. Oh, and bring the body with you. Oh, and could you record that on video too, please? Right. Remember early on the show I said that the Illuminati control both sides? That's how they are able to manipulate the outcome. Here's more proof of that. Or is it? Yesterday, Al-Qaeda was supposedly come out on one of their websites and confirmed that indeed America, the great Satan, really did kill their holiest warrior, Osama bin Laden. But we don't really know if it was a real Al-Qaeda site or if it was someone posing as an Al-Qaeda site. Hey, we don't even know for sure if there are any legitimate Al-Qaeda sites to begin with. I don't even believe, for example, that there is an Al-Qaeda. I believe that is a made-up, fictitious army that has no uniform, no country, and no distinctive demarcations. So you have no idea who is one and who isn't the perfect enemy, the perfect one to perpetrate a hoax. Space back with more in a moment on A View from Space on AM 640. This is Talk Radio.
Deprogramming the brainwashed simply by uncovering the truth. He's the Spaceman with A View from Space on AM 640.
I'm the guy that calls space. It's View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. It's the final segment this evening. CS writes, sent from his BlackBerry, I worked as a stonemason in Virginia for a man named John Henry. I won't go into the details about him. Give me liberty or give me death should lead you to his roots. Your story of the red men in a circle sent shivers down my spine. He built a mini Stonehenge on his property. He invited us to celebrate at an event where they wear druid outfits, form a circle. They light a bonfire. I was so creeped out, I thought my wife and I were going to be sacrificed. I'm a civil engineer and not a wing knight by any stretch of the imagination. But I can tell you a lot more conversations I've had with this man. Now, I was talking about Al-Qaeda not even being an army. No uniform. No markings of identity at all. Look like ordinary people. Already proven in America that Al-Qaeda could actually be in a U.S. uniform, sitting beside you, taking basic training at Fort Hood. Remember that guy? Whips a gun out in the mess, kills a bunch of soldiers. A Manchurian candidate, to be sure, planted there to indiscriminately kill and to instill fear and hatred for the other side of the world. It's exactly the same feeling I get when I watch the global newscasts that show image after image of this latest Syrian one now, where this protesting is spreading into Syria. And the army and the tanks are called out. But the people that have no weapons go to the squares every day anyway, we're told. I'm not buying it for a minute. You can get shots of a crowd anytime on Friday at a mosque. Make it a little herky-jerky and all of a sudden you've got yourself a video that looks like there's a lot of people out protesting. But are they? And what are they protesting, if they are? How about high food prices? Forget democracy. You're not going to stand out there and let the army gun you down and then come back again tomorrow and hope you win. It's so, one-sided. You don't have hope. Not a chance. But this is the propaganda that is being fed North Americans and Europeans, and many are buying it. Because here's what's going to come of it all. After Syria, it's Iran. Then, are we going to have the West intervene there? Or will Israel just go, enough of this, and attack? That could spark it. Fatah and Hamas have struck a deal this week also, pushing the Israeli even further. A known terrorist organization, Hamas and Fatah, the ones running the Palestinian government right now, have made a pact, a deal, and want the Israeli at the peace table. You see, London has told them, get it done. The show is not for the politicians, but for the people, to force the people into a certain way and a certain belief. So after Syria, it's Iran. Brace yourself. This is the way the bin Laden reported death will fit into the scenario of sparking a third world war between the Muslims versus the Jews and Christians. The recent lies of a fast-spreading secular-driven, that is non-religious now, this secular yearning for democracy by the people, the Arab people, to handle their own affairs and break away from their old despotic leadership that's been sweeping the top of Africa and the countries of Yemen, Egypt, Tunisia, Bahrain, and now Syria, and the similar herky-jerky camera images emanating from each of these countries, making it look like these people will now do anything to attain their freedom, including giving up their lives if that's what it'll take, when nothing could be further from the truth. If there are any Muslims who have actually been convinced that these acts of protestation will bring them this freedom, they're going to be totally dejected when they find out that this sweeping desire for change will, in fact, not change anything in their country at all, as the Egyptians are finding out. And they will be no better off than when the dictator ran it all. They will think, okay, the dictators just took all the money for themselves and left us unemployed and hungry, and now this secular move to democracy is falling apart and can't change anything either. They will then be left with only one final choice, which isn't a choice. The holy jihad that Osama bin Laden has been the symbolic head of. It will be the only remaining choice left for change, to drive the West out of their land, rule it themselves through their religion of Islam. This has already been espoused by the Afghans in the Taliban heartland of southern Afghanistan, who described Osama bin Laden as Al-Qaeda's #1 martyr. Yes, the U.S. did not inadvertently make bin Laden a martyr for the Muslims. That was part of the plan of the Illuminati, who control the United States all along. Bin Laden's use is now complete. Except, of course, as I've already stated, that he will return. He will speak from the grave in a pre-recorded message, and the Illuminati-controlled mass media will play it over and over and over in the very near future to get maximum effect out of it. You will see I'm correct on this soon. The date for its release, let's see. The date for its release could possibly even be this September 11th, on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. Sound logical to you? Sounds logical to me for a release date. How about you? Bin Laden, the mastermind of the September 11th, 2001 hijacked airliner attacks on the United States, was killed in a gunfight with U.S. forces in a luxurious palace north of Pakistani capital Islamabad on Sunday, officials say. Now, he is the #1 martyr for all Al-Qaeda, because he is stronger dead than alive, said one who asked not to be identified, from the southern Afghan city of Kandahar. He also said he always predicted that he would be killed by Americans. Now he will become on fire, that Muslims will follow for generations. Some Afghan officials also took the bin Laden influence and said it would continue, and believed that the militant network would try to avenge his death. And already, confirmation is on your television set. If you care to turn it on to a newscast, you'll find the Taliban are already avenging bin Laden's death. You see, that's why they invoked the bin Laden killing, so that they could ramp up this war. This is not a celebration and an end to something. No, this is ramping up the war on terror. Ahmad Vali Karzai, you've heard of him? The brother of Afghan President Hamid Karzai. Big landowners, by the way, in Afghanistan. Southern Afghanistan, where the poppies grow. His death will bring about positive changes for the movement and for a short time. But for the future, it will intensify fighting in Afghanistan because Al-Qaeda will seek revenge. Ahmad Vali Karzai is also the head of Kandahar's provincial council. He's one of the most powerful men in southern Afghanistan. He is also the man who has strong connections with all the heroin crops in the country. You see, Ahmad and Hamid Karzai, the brothers' family, owns the land the poppies grow on. Business partners, again, of the Illuminati. All the leaders they fight are business partners, because it's really not cut clear in truth that one government is fighting another. The governments are in lockstep with one another. The fight is to convince the people to go to war, because, as I said earlier in the show, you cannot get people to go to war against one another for unjust reasons. You must trick them. You must fool them with propaganda before they will ever go to battle for you and give their lives for your cause. It's happened twice. Third time's the charm. So the Illuminati believe. This has been A View from Space on AM 640 Talk Radio. Coast to Coast is next. I'm Space, and I'm